Hi, everybody, it's Jody Bach, and I'm here to share some ideas with you about keeping the fire burning, but not burning out. And I know we use that metaphor a lot in business. We tell people we want you to fire up and bring everything you have to work. But if we're not careful, we expect that people will always be on. And what can happen sometimes is that they'll burn out. So this presentation is entitled Fire Up But Don't Burn Out, and it will give you some ideas to keep your teams engaged and yourself engaged without burning out. So I'm going to give you a warning as I start with this presentation. One time somebody asked me if I would come and present something to their organization, and they said, but we don't want it to be too heavy. Just make us laugh. And I thought, well, that's not me, because I'm going to make you think. That's just what I do. And I'm reminded of this quote by Henry Ford, who said that thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason so few people do it. And if you think about that for a second, it's probably kind of true. So I like Henry. I also like Peter Block, who is one of my favorite authors and has written several books I really enjoy. And he reminds me all the time that questions are more transformational than answers. So often we get in the mode of problem solving and wanting to make sure that we have all the answers. And we're afraid to even do anything that might take us out of our comfort zone because we might not have the answers. And Peter reminds us that having a really good question is often, probably most often, more important than pursuing the right answer. So keep that in mind. I'm aware of our world right now and where we are in our world. And what I think is probably the biggest threat to the world right now is our lack of consciousness. We appear to me, most of us, many of us, to be sleepwalking through our lives. And so it occurred to me as I was thinking one day about how people wake up in their lives. I mean, wake up in the morning. How do you wake up in the morning? And some people, when they wake up to the sun shining on them. And in their lives, sometimes things just kind of dawn on them. And it's kind of a slow, steady, comfortable process when things dawn on us. And awakening is like that. It might be a slow, steady process. But for some people, it occurs to me that they are still sleepwalking their way through life. And I wonder if maybe this is a way that some people need to be awakened. Just watch this little video clip and see if you don't agree with me. Is that what it takes sometimes? We're just minding our own business and all of a sudden we're stomped awake? For some of us, that might be what we need. Because for some of us, we're living a life of complacency and mediocrity and okay enough. And I'm not sure that is enough anymore. I'm not sure that's going to keep us engaged. So it's not that we are short on wake-up calls, because as Brene Brown reminds us, the universe is not short on wake-up calls. It's just that we're quick to hit the snooze button. And so I'm curious about what it is we're snoozing past in our own lives. I like this metaphor too. If you haven't already noticed, I like metaphors. I'm an English major. Sometimes I feel I need to apologize for that. But I like this metaphor of popcorn, because if you consider what's happening in this video that we're watching, popcorn is popping, right? There's the oil is in the pan, and you'll notice that some of these kernels that are popping are popping, and they're popping out of the pan. Look in the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see that some of these kernels have popped out of the pan. Some of these kernels have popped, like that one, and just stays in the pan. And some of these kernels aren't popping. And if you consider that, just for an example, let's just say that this pan that you're seeing on the stove is your workplace. And if the heat gets turned up at your workplace, some people will pop. They are kernels of corn that pop, and they pop out. They go out of the organization. They pop early, they get the information, and they leave. Some pop, get it, pop, and stay in the organization. And some, sadly, may never pop. And so if you're someone who, I call that the early poppers. If you're someone who's an early popper, someone who kind of sees the light, wakes up before others, what happens many times, if you're not a person who pops and pops out of the pan, what happens in an organization, if people don't get it, if the light doesn't come on and they're in the pan, it could be like this, where there are some kernels that are just sitting around waiting for everybody else to get it, to pop. And often what bosses think they need to do is stir things up, provide some agitation. Come on, people, let's go. Let's fire up. Come on. And sometimes that agitation is like that spoon, and sometimes it works and it causes people to pop. But if that doesn't work, then they turn up the heat. And agitation and heat might cause more to pop. But what about those that stayed in the pan and decided not to leave? They get burned up or burned out. And so when you think about this analogy, I think it does relate, at least it does to me, to my early career. I was an early popper in almost every job I had, and I got bored. And I stayed and I did the work, and there were people around me who just never popped. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because I think this analogy, it can be very true. So when you think about us as human beings, I think we're all pretty well aware of how we get to be where we are in our workplaces, in our lives. You've heard of nature and nurture, two really important pieces to who we become as human beings, our DNA and our upbringing. Very important. Yet there's one piece of this that I think we forget about, probably the most important piece. Nature, nurture, but we forget about choice. At some point in our lives as adults, responsible adults they call us, when we are able to respond to things instead of being only at the mercy of those things and situations around us and reacting, when we become responsible adults, we have the power of choice. And I believe sometimes we forget about that. So let's consider this whole concept of choice. There are some distinctions in the way we use language that I think we have the ability, I know we have the ability to choose, but we may not know them. We may not be aware of these distinctions. So I'm going to give you some information about some word choices that we might be using interchangeably right now without even realizing it. So let's get clear on some of these distinctions, because then we'll have the ability to choose which works best for us. So the first one I want to talk about is dialogue and discussion. Many times we'll use these interchangeably, and we'll say, let's have a discussion. Many times we just use discussion. We don't even think about the word dialogue. And since I've become aware of this distinction, I am really clear that I'm much more interested in dialogue than in discussion, because the word discussion comes from the same root as percussion and concussion. So think about the energy that word carries with it. Discussion. Let's have a conversation, and I will tell you what I think, and we'll discuss it. On the other hand, what if we use the word dialogue, which means to suspend previous assumptions in order to learn from each other? How would our conversations and our interactions be different if we all agreed to suspend, not get rid of necessarily, but to suspend previous assumptions in order to learn from each other? I think it would make all the difference in the world. So here's the first distinction: discussion, dialogue. The second one is interest and commitment. I believe that everyone has interests in his or her life. If you're interested in something, you'll do what it takes when it's easy. If you're interested in getting a new job, you'll do what it takes when it's easy. If you're interested in getting healthier, getting fitter, you'll do what it takes when it's easy. If you are interested in getting a new car, you'll do what it takes when it's easy. And when it gets hard, you'll stop wanting it. But if you are committed to something, you will do whatever it takes without violating the rights of others, even when the emotion you set it in wears off. That's commitment. You'll do whatever it takes without violating the rights of others, even when the emotion you set it in wears off. And I believe we are lacking in commitment. We have a ton of interest. We're interested in things getting better. We're interested in learning about other cultures. But when it gets hard, we stop. We're interested in trying new foods. But if we decide we don't like it, we'll stop. So there's a lot of interest, but not a lot of commitment in my experience. Second distinction. Third is problem and solution. All problems are in the past. So theoretically, where we sit right now as you're watching this video, you have no problems. Because in this moment, everything that's a problem has already happened to you. I'm not saying we should get rid of the things that happened, the problems, but we should come at them with a solution mindset, not a problem mindset, because solutions are in the present. All problems are in the past. Solutions are in the present. And if we can look at what's already happened with a solution focus instead of a need to keep bringing up the problem, I believe we will have way different conversations. Again, dialogue, discussion about problems and solutions will change everything about the way we are living. And the last one is beware and be aware. I think we've gotten a lot of conversations lately around beware. Beware of things. Beware, everything's going to be bad. This person's out to get you. This is what's going to happen if you make the wrong choice. Beware, beware, beware. And we're scaring everybody. We're throwing fear out into the world in such huge doses without even realizing we're doing it. So there's a huge distinction between being aware of things. Be aware, for sure, be aware, notice. But beware is always about the other shoe dropping and what's going to happen right around the corner. And, oh my gosh, I need to walk on eggshells because everything's terrible. And what happens when you show up in a beware stance, in a beware energy, you're tight. Everything's tight. And time goes a lot more slowly when you're in that, oh my gosh, this is never going to get over. I'm so, oh, this is horrible. And when you let go of this fear, everything seems a lot more fun, a lot easier. Time seems to go faster. And you find yourself in a much different energy. Be aware is very different from beware. So those are the 4 distinctions I just wanted to remind you of. Think about those as we go. Because if you're not aware, you can't do better. You can't do better if you don't know better. But if you know better and choose not to do better, that's as if you don't even know at all. So now that you know, you have choices. And this is the opportunity you have to step in to a different future than the one you're destined to live if you don't know any better. Some things to think about. Because if we're not in a space where we can take in all of the information that is around us, we have no chance of living a different future. And we as humans are not the best at making these really big decisions because we've never really been taught how to make decisions. We've been taught, okay, maybe I've been taught in my mind that I have to have enough information in my head. I have to have all my knowledge and all of the wisdom. I have to stuff it in my head. You can see, if you see behind me, all these books I have, because I thought I needed to read everything and be as smart as I could be in my head, because that's my intellect. My intellect has to be, as strong as it can be. And that's how I'll make my decisions. And I've made many decisions based on the knowledge I have only. I've forgotten that there are at least two other factors to consider in making decisions. And I call those your intellect in your head, your wisdom and knowledge, your intuition, which is your heart, your connection to infinite intelligence. It's what your heart tells you. And then your instinct is what your gut tells you. And I learned just recently that your gut, we all know it's fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze, is in your instinct, in your gut. But did you know that that's also where your need to belong comes from? Your connection. When you think about instinct and you think about animal instinct, animals want to gather with their people. I guess it wouldn't be their people. Animals want to gather with their species. And that's an instinct, to gather with your like species. So when we're making decisions, wouldn't it be great if we learned to line up those eyes, the intellect, the intuition, and the instinct, and we used all three in that decision-making process? I call that discernment. And in that discernment phase, you're taking into account what your intellect tells you, but also what your heart, your intuition tells you, and what your gut, your instinct tells you. And what I decided in 2020 was I was going to get better at this, lining up the eyes in 2020. And we know what's happened in 2020. It's given us a whole lot of opportunities to get into discernment mode. And many of us are reacting and not responding. If we would just take some time to line up the eyes, I think we'll have a better opportunity to make decisions than if we just have jump to conclusions. So what I know is that you can only connect the dots of your life looking back. You can't connect them looking forward. You can't. There's no way to know the future, except that you can look behind you and see how the dots connected. And then you do have a bit of an opportunity to build the future you want to live into by shifting the way you see yourself right now today. So everything that I'm experiencing right now today is a result of all the choices and decisions I've made up to now. And they have brought me right where I am right now today. And you know what? I've survived 100% of the days of my life up to now. And if I want to keep only surviving, I already know how to do that, because I've already done that. I can look behind me and see how the dots connected. And I can learn from what I've experienced and have an opportunity to create a future I want to live into. I might not know exactly how the dots line up, but I can use my wisdom and my instinct and my intellect and my intuition, and I can have a better opportunity to create the future I want to live into. So I just want to remind you of some of these things that you already know. You might have just forgotten. Mind is pay attention to, notice. When you mind something, you pay attention, you notice. So I'm reminding you, because then we can recognize. Cognize is understand. Cognize, recognize. We can recognize, well, because we've seen it before. And then we can also remember, come back together. So I remind you, you recognize things, and you'll remember them, because you will be looking to come together with people who are, when I say of like mind, I mean think the way you do, not think the same thing you do, but are in the space of creating the future they want to live into. That's what we do when we start with ourselves and we work on us first. So if we don't do this, if we stay in that pan and the heat gets turned up on us and we learn all these things and we get to the space of needing to grow beyond the pan that's holding us back, we might find ourselves burning up. And this is my definition of burning up when you're staying in that pan. My definition is a spontaneous combustion caused by internal frustration and not doing or saying what you know needs to be done or said. Now, where I live in the land of Minnesota nice, and we avoid conflict at all costs. And so we know we probably should say something or do something, but we avoid having those difficult conversations. And that causes us many times to burn up. And we're burning up even when we're staying in the pan. For some people, they burn out. And here's my definition of burning out: using all your energy on things you can't control. Worry, concern, doing something, but not doing the most effective something. And so when you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, knowing you need to do something, that's how you burn out. You might have heard the story about what do you do when you find yourself in a hole? Well, the first thing is to stop digging. But for many of us, we have to stay busy. We have to keep doing something. And we dig and dig and dig, and we get deeper and deeper in the hole when all we needed to do was stop digging. Take a breath. And then decide from the discernment what action to take. Now, when you think about doing this and actually doing something with the information that's been presented here, it's going to take some courage, because if it were easy, everybody would do it. And the word courage actually comes from the root kor, which means heart. So when you follow your heart, it takes courage. And when you have courage, you follow your heart. And many of us have discounted what our heart tells us because we've thought we need to think. We've thought we need to think it through. And we do, certainly part of it. But what does your heart tell you? What does that courage bring to you? Here's another of my favorite people, Albert Einstein. He said the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. What we thought got us to where we are right now. And if we keep thinking what we've always thought, we'll always get what we've always got. And it doesn't work to keep doing things over and over and over and expect different results. He tells us that's insanity. So something needs to shift. And I'm here to tell you that it's not easy, simple. The simplest thing to shift is the way you think, is your own mindset. Not easy always, but very simple. They tell you you need to be ready, willing, and able for things to happen and for things to shift around you. And I believe that. And I'm going to make an assumption here that if you're listening to this right now, you're ready to make that shift. Something in you is calling you to be ready. I also am going to make an assumption that you're able. You have the ability to shift. What I don't know is how willing you are. Willingness is the most important part of this, but I have no idea how to tell if you're willing to do what it's going to take. And what's really cool about willingness is when you are willing to do whatever it takes, and again, without violating the rights of others, it's really important that you only take control and charge of the things you can take control and charge of. But when you are willing to do whatever it takes, the universe will conspire on your behalf, and there will be shortcuts that will appear. I can think of many, many examples of this. As soon as you're ready, willing, and able to do whatever it takes to achieve, accumulate, or experience whatever your heart truly desires without violating the rights of others, shortcuts will appear because the universe is ready and willing and able to conspire on your behalf. And if you want to prove me wrong, you can. And if you'd like to prove me right, that's a way more fun way to go. It's true. If you want to get better at something, your mom might have told you, practice makes perfect. Practice it, right? But I'm an example of 12 years of piano lessons that practice makes permanent. And the way you practice is the way you will perform. And so if you do something over and over and over again, and you do it resentfully, you'll perform it resentfully. And it's no different from the dreams you have for your life. If you only dream about someday, wouldn't it be nice if, and you never make a commitment to actually wake up and do something about those dreams, you'll only ever dream. So the quote here says, do you want to get better and better at the dream, or do you want to wake up from it? And if you wake up from the dream, you are going to be required to take new action, which may be scary, which better be scary, actually, because if your dreams don't scare and excite you, they're not big enough. And that's the possibility that exists if you're willing to wake up from the dream. So awareness is key. I mean, if you don't know better, how possibly can you do better? And so let's just take a look at awareness here. Assume that this circle represents absolutely everything there is to know in the whole universe. Let's just say everything there is to know fits in this circle. Many people, dare I say most people live in that one little slice called what they know they know. I know the sky is blue. I know the grass is green. I know I was born in the United States. I know how to speak English. That's all I need to know. I know what I know, and that's all I need to know. Many people live in that slice and call it good. And then some adventurous people will go into this slice called what you know you don't know. I know there is a language called Swahili, but I know I don't know how to speak it. I know there is something called brain surgery, but I know I don't know how to do it. So that expands your awareness a little bit from what you know to what you know you don't know. But look at that whole huge area that's left. That's called what you don't even know you don't know. And if I asked you to tell me something you don't know, it's a trick question. Because if you knew, it would be in one of the other two slices. So my goal for my life is to reverse that proportion so that the smaller slice is what I don't know. And I've lived my life so that I've learned what I know, and what I know, I don't know. And that will require that I try new things, and that I learn new things, and that I experience new things, and that I make that slice of what I don't know much smaller. That's what awareness does. It opens your world up to many more possibilities than you ever could have had if you stayed stuck in what you already know. So I love that thought about awareness. And if we just do one thing from this presentation, and everywhere you go, if you just assume positive intent and assume that every single person you come into contact with, no matter where you meet them or observe them or see them, if you just assume that every single human being is doing the best he or she can with what he or she knows, isn't that a different way of being than to assume negative intent? To assume that everybody's out to get you and that the world is going to hell in a handbasket? If you just simply assume positive intent of everyone around you, I promise you your world will shift. You have to go first. It's up to you. Well, it's up to me if I'm the one presenting this, because I can't expect you to do something I'm not willing to do. And I'm doing this every single day, assuming positive intent. So here are a couple of reminders. When you're thinking about what you should say to those people you see on the street, or to the people in your life, to the people in your family, before you say anything, ask yourself these questions. Is it kind? When you talk about tough love, it's tough. If you love someone and you're tough, it still can be kind. And if you're assuming positive intent, you can be kind and still be stern. You can be kind and be tough. You can be kind and be fierce. But ask yourself, is it kind? Is it necessary? Do I even need to say this? Is it necessary? Is what I think I need to say necessary? Is it true? Oh, this one right now is so important. Is it true? Have you done your research? Have you looked? Have you found sources? Especially now on the internet where it's so easy to trash people. Is what I am about to say true to the best of my knowledge? And the last one is, does it improve on the silence? So many times silence can do the heavy lifting, and we feel the need to put words into the silence. Does it improve on the silence? Does what I feel the need to say actually make things better? Ask yourself before you say anything. So here is what you can consider for yourself. Waking up, becoming conscious, stopping hitting the snooze button is going to mean that your light will shine. And like a lighthouse, your light shines and is on all the time. It just doesn't always have to be shining in the same place. If you allow your light to keep shining, it never has to go out. That pilot light in you, that spark of inspiration, that part of you that makes you you, the little light, it might go down, it might dim, but it never has to go out if you surround yourself with people who keep your fire burning. Fire up, but don't burn out. You might burn out if you think you have to shine in the same place all the time and you always have to be on. You don't always have to be on. You can be consistent without being constant. Be consistent, even if you can't always be constant. Let your light shine, even if it's just a little flicker. But keep that light going, because the world needs your light. Your light. Your light first. Don't wait for somebody else. And the cool thing about a candle, for example, you don't lose any light by lighting somebody else's candle. Edith Wharton said there are two ways of spreading light in the world: to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. So don't let your light go out completely, but just remember, it doesn't always have to be shining in the same direction. Be the lighthouse, be the beacon. Fire up, but don't burn out. So think about what we've talked about here. What can you do now? What can you now do that you'd like to do that you aren't doing? Is there something in your life that you're inspired to think about doing or providing to the world? What is that? It could be simple little thing. I was thinking today about singing. I want to sing in a quartet. I want to sing the national anthem if we ever can get back in sports again. I've done it before, but I want to sing in a mixed quartet. I really want to do this. But if I just want to, I'll just do what it takes when it's easy. I'm not committed. So I'm committed to singing in a quartet at singing the national anthem in a quartet this next sports season if we have games. I'm a huge basketball fan, college basketball fan, and I am the head scorekeeper for the college basketball teams in my town. So it would be easy for me to do this. I just need to find the quartet and practice and do it. So what are you willing to do? What can you now do that you'd like to do that you aren't doing? And my advice to you is to do it. Do it. Life is just too short to avoid doing the things that are in your heart. The little light that needs to come out. Do it. So consider for yourself any ahas that you might have had from the time that you've been listening to this conversation. Any ahas. What will you do with what you've heard? And I'd like to invite you to go download a book of mine, an ebook. I think, as I said earlier, Peter Block says that questions are more transformational than answers. Well, this book is a book of questions, and it's free. It's an ebook, so it's not the complete book, but it will give you some questions to start conversation, ignite conversation, and spark dialogue. And that's my gift to you, because if we are to change the world for the better by getting into dialogue, We have to do that together. Engaging other people in conversations that matter, because that's what makes the world go round. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. And I challenge you to go find whatever is in your heart wanting to come out. Go do it. Thanks, everybody.